Welcome to Mechano N6. Today's video is going to be on flywheels. Of all the modules of Mechano N6, flywheels is one of the modules that are considered to be easy. In fact, according to me, this is the easiest module for two reasons. First, because you do not get to learn so many new things. And the second reason is because it is short, okay? So you can quickly go through it and understand and know how to do it. But if you struggled in engineering science and for when you were doing angular motion, then you may find flywheels to be difficult. But for anybody who understands angular motion, then flywheels is going to be a chapter that you will just navigate through very easily. Okay, so we're going to begin. But before I start, I want to say that I always advise people who use my content to learn to actually get a hold of the notes that I am using in my presentations, okay? So that you can have it in front of you and you're watching the video and you can follow through your notes, okay? And so if you wish to get a hold of this guide that I am using for Mechano N6, you can contact me using the number in my description and we will see how we can make that available to you. So let's begin. Flywheels, what is a flywheel? Basically, a flywheel is a mass. Okay, that's really what a flywheel is. It is a mass that is used. You could think of it for the purpose of balancing. Since we're talking about Mechano N6, okay, a flywheel does serve the purpose of somewhat balancing the fluctuations of an engine, okay? Because when an engine is working, the power that it is producing, which you can think of also in terms of the rotation of maybe a shaft that is connected to it, is actually fluctuating, okay? So in reality, that shaft, maybe if we say that it is rotating on average at 2,000 rotations per minute, this is not to say that every time you will check it and try to find how fast it is rotating, you will get exactly 2,000, okay? Sometimes you may get a little more than 2,000, a little less, and so you have those fluctuations happening. You know, in real life, there is no system that is perfectly accurate. And so to be able to mitigate those fluctuations, that's one of the reasons you will want to use a flywheel, because it will oppose and moderate the fluctuations in the speed of the engine, okay? And so it can store the excess energy and use it intermittently at times where the engine is maybe performing at a lower rate than it should, okay? Slightly lower, it's never really anything big, okay? So when we talk of a vehicle, okay, I'm speaking about cars, trucks, and so on, okay, usually you will have the flywheel and the clutch, okay, engaging each other, okay? So this is really important, particularly when we're dealing with this particular module here, because when we will begin to talk about kinetic energies, you will see that you have the kinetic energy of the clutch, and then you have the kinetic energy of the flywheel, and then when they engage and become one unit, then you will have the kinetic energy of both of them together, okay? So we will get into that very soon, but first let us look at some of the important formulas that you're going to need for this particular chapter. By the way, this picture here is a picture of a flywheel, okay? The flywheel of a car. Okay, you've probably seen it if you're doing mechanical engineering and you are passionate about cars. You must have seen a flywheel before. Okay, so let us look at some of the formulas we're going to deal with. None of this is actually new, okay, but I am going to just introduce them to you again for the purpose of reminding you. Okay, so first, angular velocity. Okay, we use the Greek letter omega to refer to angular velocity. And you will recall from Science N4 that angular velocity is equal to linear velocity divided by the radius. And also we have a formula that we use very often in Mechano, that the angular velocity is equal to 2 pi multiplied by the natural frequency n, and you divide by 60 if n is given in RPM, okay? If n is given in revolutions per second, then you do not need to divide by 60. The second equation is that of the angular acceleration. Again, because it's angular motion, we use Greek letters, and so it's alpha, okay? And alpha will be equal to the linear acceleration a divided by the radius, okay? So that's what it is. And this again is from Science and 4. The kinetic energy also, as you know, kinetic energy is equal to work done, okay, divided by efficiency. If you have a situation where you have efficiency, and the work done is equal to force multiplied by distance. You know that also. And if we have an efficiency, then the kinetic energy produced by the engine, the input energy, if you want to find it, then you will divide the work done by the efficiency, okay? So kinetic energy is equal to work done. If you have an efficiency, then the input, the kinetic energy that was input by the engine is equal to the work done divided by that efficiency if you are given an efficiency in the equation. Work uses units of joules, okay, and kinetic energy also uses units of joules, okay, we all know that. Okay, so now the kinetic energy when you're dealing with angular motion is equal to 1/2I. I is the mass moment of inertia multiplied by omega squared, which is the angular velocity squared, okay? So kinetic energy is equal to half mass moment of inertia multiplied by angular velocity squared. So this is what it is, okay? This is what it is, okay? If you can't remember this equation, you can just think of the normal equation for linear motion for kinetic energy, 1/2 mv squared, okay? So when we're dealing with angular motion, what is the equivalent of mass is the mass moment of inertia. What is the equivalent of velocity, linear velocity? When you deal with angular motion, that will be the angular velocity, okay? So 1/2I omega squared. So the change in kinetic energy will be equal to the kinetic energy at the final velocity minus the kinetic energy at the initial velocity. So if you want to write it here, you can write it like this, okay? 1/2I, and then you open the bracket, you put these like that. But if you want, you could write 1/2I omega 2 squared minus 1/2I omega 1 squared, okay? So the change in kinetic energy of any system that is rotating is given by this, okay? Now, what I was talking about before, I'm sorry for the noise in the background. By the way, I am not in my usual setting of recording, but I'm sure you can still hear me clearly, okay? So I apologize for that, okay? So now, the loss in kinetic energy, okay, is equal to the kinetic energy before minus the kinetic energy after, okay? So now, as I was saying in my introduction, when we speak of this of flywheels, particularly in this module, you may have a situation where we have to think of a flywheel and a clutch. Okay, so initially the flywheel has its own kinetic energy and the clutch also has its own kinetic energy. So if you want to find the kinetic energy that was there before they engage, you need to take the kinetic energy of the clutch and add to that the kinetic energy of the flywheel, okay? Now, after they engage, because now they become one unit, they will both have the same angular velocity because now they've engaged, they are now rotating at the same time together. However, the mass of them will be the sum of the two masses, okay? And so you can then find the second kinetic energy. That will be the final kinetic energy because that is what you have after they engage. So now, if you are if you have a question where they ask you to find the difference or the change in kinetic energy, you will sum up what they had individually before they engage, and then you will do to that you will then do minus the kinetic energy that they have together after they engage. And so this is what this equation is, okay? Loss in kinetic energy is equal to kinetic energy before engaging minus kinetic energy after